Alien princes, horrified, they fought humanity's scouts and lost everything sci-fi. The Velori Dominion was a galaxy-spanning empire ruled by generations of princes, each trained from birth in war, strategy, and the art of command. Among them, Prince Kale and his younger brother, Prince Varin, were celebrated for their daring campaigns along the outer edges of Dominion space. They had never lost a battle, never faced a foe they could not outsmart. For them, humanity was a curiosity at best, a young, scattered species whose systems barely registered on the Dominion's charts. The reports that first reached them described human colonies in simple, dismissive terms: primitive settlements, lightly defended space stations, and small, disorganized fleets. The Velori analysts claimed that the humans were divided into small planetary governments, weak in technology and unlikely to unify against any real threat. The princes, ambitious and confident, decided to see humanity for themselves. It was not just reconnaissance, it was an opportunity for glory. "We will test them," Prince Kale said to his council. "A minor strike, nothing more. If they resist, we will crush them. If they flee, we will take their worlds without lifting our full strength." The Velori ships were a marvel of engineering, capable of high-speed jumps across space and rapid reconfiguration in battle. Kale and Varin led from the flagship, Dreadspear, a vessel that gleamed like polished obsidian in the cold light of distant stars. The first human system they entered seemed almost empty. A few small vessels darted near the outer moons, scanning and recording but never engaging. The prince's advisors reported their positions and readiness. "Pathetic," Kale murmured. "They send children to confront the Dominion." They fired warning beams across the void, signaling the humans to surrender. The human ships, instead of running, attempted minor evasive maneuvers, small, erratic, and confusing. The princes thought it foolish. They expected panic, not tactics. Kale ordered a strike. Beams of plasma cut through the empty void. One by one, human ships began to falter, their shields flaring and their engines stuttering. The Velori cheered, convinced victory was immediate. And then something strange happened. The human ships began to scatter in multiple directions, but they did not flee. Each movement seemed purposeful, calculated, as if they were leading the Velori fleet along a path they had chosen. Sensors revealed nothing unusual, no hidden weapons, no traps, yet the fleet felt tension, a creeping awareness that the humans were not simply panicked. Kale frowned. "Why do they retreat so carefully? Why not run entirely?" "They are avoiding our direct fire, but there is no conventional strategy here that I recognize." Kale and Varin began to feel the first stirrings of unease, not because they feared the humans, but because they could not predict them. Every maneuver they made was anticipated, every tactic countered, even though the humans were far fewer in number and smaller in firepower. Finally, one of the human ships broke formation and fired a small, precise energy burst at the Dreadspire. It was not powerful enough to damage the shields, but it was accurate, almost mocking in its simplicity. Kale's eyes narrowed. "An insult," he hissed. "They dare strike at me." Clever but meaningless. After the engagement, the Velori fleet finally reached the inner moons of the human system. There were settlements here, but they were small and primitive, with barely functional orbital defenses. The princes laughed. "Look at them," Kale said. "Barely a planet worth conquering. A victory here will be remembered for generations." The princes assumed they were walking through an empty world, that nothing could surprise them. But humans had a habit of being unpredictable. Within hours, the scouts who had initially engaged the Velori were sending reports to human command. From these reports, human engineers began calculating the weaknesses of the Velori fleet. Commanders reviewed every maneuver, every misstep, and began planning countermeasures. Back on the Velori side, the princes celebrated their apparent victory. Their soldiers boasted, their banners flew, and their ships' engines hummed triumphantly. Kale and Varin allowed themselves a rare moment of indulgence, sharing wine and conversation about the ease of conquest. Yet, even in their celebration, small signals went unnoticed. A distant human relay flashed information they could not intercept. Fleets that had been idle suddenly moved with purpose. Supply lines were disrupted mysteriously, and minor human patrols began harassing the edges of Valori control in ways that were irritating but not dangerous. Kale waved it off. "They are only scouting," he said. "No fleet can form from such insignificant numbers." They were not like other species he had conquered. They did not cower in fear. They did not plead for mercy. They observed, adapted, and persisted. They were not strong in ways he expected, but there was a hidden strength, a silent intelligence that could not be measured by weapons or fleet size. Varin noticed the same tension. He did not speak of it, for it was dangerous to admit doubt, but he felt it too. Far above the planet in the void of space, human scouts continued their mission. Though some had been damaged, none were destroyed. They relayed every piece of data they could gather. Every miscalculation of the Valori fleet was noted. Every arrogance, every assumption was catalogued. Humanity did not rush to fight. Humanity prepared. The Valori princes believed they had won. They returned to their fleet, confident, triumphant, and unaware of the storm that was quietly forming. In their pride, they missed the warning signals, the subtle hints that humans were not to be trifled with. The first mistake had been made. And by the time the princes realized it, it would already be too late. The Valori princes returned to their ships, still basking in the illusion of victory. Prince Kale ordered his fleet to hold position near the human colonies, while scouts were sent to survey neighboring systems. Varin watched the sensors closely, but neither of them could see what was quietly unfolding beyond their perception. Humans, though appearing weak and scattered, were not idle. Every scout ship that had confronted the Valori transmitted its data to human command. Even damaged vessels sent encrypted signals, each report containing details of the Valori ships, speed, shield patterns, firing sequences, and tactical tendencies. Engineers studied these reports tirelessly. Scientists and tacticians worked together, analyzing weaknesses in the Valori formations, and slowly a plan began to take shape. On a distant orbital station, human commanders convened. They were calm, composed, and united. "Our scouts are returning with more than reports," said Commander Leora, her voice firm. "They have mapped their fleet structure, predicted their maneuvers, and observed the psychology of their leaders. They expect fear. They do not understand patience. Every misstep they make will become our advantage." Meanwhile, in Valori space, Prince Kale noticed the first signs of trouble. Supply lines to the colonies they had occupied were being disrupted. Small human ships, which he assumed were insignificant, began to harass convoys and installations, always retreating before a full engagement. "This is nothing," he told Varin. "Minor annoyances. They cannot threaten our fleet." "They are learning faster than expected. Every attack we intercept, every ambush we counter, they seem one step ahead. It is unsettling." Some human ships feigned retreats, only to loop back and strike at vulnerable points in the fleet. Others mimicked weak formations to draw the Valori into positions that exposed their supply chains. Every human action was deliberate, measured, and coordinated without central command intervention. Then came the first proper engagement. A Valori squadron moved toward a critical relay station to reinforce their hold over a human colony. Scouts detected what appeared to be minimal resistance, so Kale ordered a direct attack. The humans had anticipated this. Using the data from previous encounters, small human strike groups ambushed the Valori squadron from multiple directions. They avoided direct confrontation, instead targeting communication arrays, maneuvering thrusters, and energy distributors, non-lethal strikes that slowed the fleet without destroying it. The Valori soldiers were stunned. Their powerful ships, accustomed to swift victories, struggled to respond. Every move they made seemed to be anticipated. Kale's frustration grew. "Why do they know our every maneuver?" he demanded. "They are children, not strategists." For the first time, Kale felt the unfamiliar sting of doubt. The human fleet did not stop at skirmishes. They began targeting Valori supply depots, cutting off fuel and ammunition. They infiltrated communications networks, subtly altering reports to mislead the princes into making poor decisions. Every Valori move, once considered decisive, was now slowed, questioned, and countered. Yet even in the midst of this disruption, humanity did not strike for total victory. They moved with restraint. They disrupted, adapted, and tested, always learning. Human soldiers were not reckless. They were deliberate. Every loss was a lesson, every maneuver a preparation for the next step. One day, a small human squadron lured a Valori strike team into a seemingly weakly defended system. The Valori pursued eagerly, confident in an easy victory. But the system had been prepared. Automated defenses, mobile platforms, and hidden energy pulses disabled key systems in the Valori ships. The princes watched in disbelief as their prized vessels became immobilized, not destroyed, but rendered useless for hours. Kale slammed his fist on the console. How can this be? We should be invincible. The Valori had underestimated them completely. By now, the human influence extended beyond the battlefield. Subject species under Valori control began sending messages to human colonies, seeking trade and protection. Humans did not demand obedience. They offered autonomy, aid, and fairness. Slowly, systems that once feared the princes began to consider alternatives. The Dominion's power, once unchallenged, was starting to erode. Back on the battlefield, Kale and Varin attempted to regain control. They ordered precise strikes, expecting their superior technology to overwhelm human forces. Yet every engagement revealed the same truth. Humans were flexible, unpredictable, and remarkably patient. They anticipated patterns and adapted instantly. Every loss the humans suffered became data, every maneuver an opportunity to improve. In one notable battle, a Valori flagship attempted to trap a human convoy. The princes were confident. The convoy was small, defenseless, and cornered, but the humans executed a perfect ambush. Using decoys, rapid maneuvers, and terrain advantages, they surrounded the Valori flagship, forcing it to retreat with serious damage. For the first time, Kale felt the sharp edge of fear. Not fear for his life, but fear for his pride, his fleet, and the Dominion's honor. "Every move we make," he muttered, staring at the holographic display of the battlefield, "they anticipate it. They are studying us." Human ingenuity was slowly strangling the Dominion's advantage. Supply lines were cut. Communications were intercepted. Plans were anticipated. And through it all, humanity did not panic, did not overextend, and did not underestimate. The princes were learning too, but painfully too late. Their pride had blinded them. Their arrogance had led them into a web of precision and intelligence that they had no experience in navigating. Every misstep was a lesson for humanity, every success a humiliation for the Valori. By the end of this campaign, entire Valori fleets had been delayed or neutralized without ever being destroyed. Systems that were once secure now faced unrest, as local leaders began questioning the Dominion's power. And through it all, human scouts continued their quiet work, gathering data, coordinating attacks, and preparing the next phase of the campaign. Kale and Varin met in private on the Dreadspire, the black void of space stretching endlessly beyond the viewports. "This cannot continue," Kale said, his voice tight. "We cannot be outsmarted by a species so small. We must show them the might of the Valori." Humanity, he realized, was a species that learned faster, adapted quicker, and endured longer than anything the Valori had imagined. And yet, even in this moment of tension, a faint, almost invisible thread of hope lingered for the humans. They had not yet unleashed their full potential, but already they had taken the first steps toward a campaign that would challenge the might of a Dominion. The scouts, the silent observers, had become the architects of a new reality, and the Valori princes, arrogant and unprepared, were only beginning to understand the consequences of underestimating humanity. The first wave of true conflict was still ahead. The Velori might have thought they were victorious, but the humans were readying a response that would soon shake the Dominion to its core. The stage was set for an epic struggle, and humanity, patient and calculating, was poised to teach the princes the first of many lessons. The Velori Dominion had never known confusion like this. For centuries, their fleets had moved with perfect order, their princes issuing commands that were followed without question. Now, that order was cracking. Reports from across the contested systems painted a disturbing picture. Human forces were everywhere and nowhere at the same time. They did not hold territory in the traditional sense. Instead, they disrupted, redirected, and dismantled the Dominion's control piece by piece. Prince Kael stood on the bridge of the Dreadspire, staring at the star map. Entire regions that once glowed with Velori authority now flickered with uncertainty. Supply depots were offline. Communication relays failed without warning. Patrols vanished only to reappear damaged and confused days later. "This is not war," Kael said angrily. "This is chaos." He had been studying intercepted human communications, translated with difficulty. What he saw disturbed him deeply. Humans were not celebrating victories. They were recording outcomes, noting failures, and calmly adjusting their strategies. "They are not fighting to defeat us in one strike," Varin finally said. "They are fighting to make us collapse." When Velori fleets gathered to respond, the humans withdrew, leaving nothing but wasted fuel and exhausted crews behind. The true turning point came when several subject species openly defied the Dominion. Entire systems refused to send resources or troops. Messages began circulating, quiet at first, then impossible to ignore, describing humanity not as conquerors but as partners. Human diplomats protected by scout escorts reached out to these worlds. They offered fair trade, defense agreements, and self-rule. They did not demand loyalty. They offered choice. For the Velori princes, this was unthinkable. "They undermine us without firing a single weapon," Kael growled. "This is manipulation, not honor. Stability does, and they are taking that from us." Scout reports flowed in from every direction. Human ships did not challenge the Armada. They attacked everything around it. Fuel convoys vanished. Repair yards were disabled. Navigation beacons were corrupted. The Velori fleet arrived at the system fully intact, but isolated, undersupplied, and blind. Then the humans struck. Small strike groups emerged from hidden positions, targeting command ships and sensor arrays. They did not destroy the fleet. They confused it. Orders contradicted each other. Signals overlapped. Velori captains, trained to follow strict hierarchies, hesitated when commands failed to align. Human ships exploited that hesitation. They moved freely, changing tactics mid-battle. When a maneuver failed, they adjusted instantly. When a ship was damaged, others covered it without waiting for orders. Every pilot seemed capable of independent decision-making. Kael watched the battle unfold, disbelief hardening into fear. "They are fighting without structure," he said. "How is this possible?" "Their structure is flexibility." Others welcomed human advisors and defense platforms. Human scouts played a new role. No longer just observers, they became guides and teachers. They helped local forces improve defenses, shared technology adapted to each species' needs, and built trust instead of fear. The Dominion was unraveling. Kael demanded a final solution. "We end this now," he declared. "A decisive strike. We destroy their command centers and force them to surrender." They had prepared layered defenses and fallback positions. More importantly, they had prepared their allies. When Velori fleets entered contested systems, they were met not only by humans, but by local forces trained and supported by human advisors. These defenders knew their terrain. They fought smart, avoided unnecessary losses, and delayed the Velori advance long enough for human reinforcements to arrive. For the first time in Velori history, the Dominion was fighting a war it could not control. Kale watched reports scroll across the bridge, each worse than the last. Fleets delayed, orders ignored, entire systems refusing to comply. "This is impossible," he whispered. Varin placed a hand on the console, steadying himself. "We taught them everything they needed when we fought their scouts. Every battle we fought became a lesson for them." Human command now possessed years of tactical insight compressed into weeks of observation. They knew how the Velori thought, how they reacted under pressure, and how their hierarchy broke down when faced with uncertainty. The humans had turned knowledge into power. As the conflict dragged on, the Dominion's economy suffered. Trade routes collapsed. Military production slowed. Citizens grew restless. For the first time, the princes faced internal dissent. Kale retreated to his private chamber, staring at a projection of human space. It was larger now, not through conquest, but through alliance. "They were never weak," he said quietly. Varin stood beside him. "No, they were patient." They continued their methodical advance, offering peace where possible and resistance where necessary. Their message was consistent: coexist or step aside. Velori commanders, exhausted and disillusioned, began surrendering ships rather than fight battles they could not win. Some defected outright, seeking asylum under human protection. The Dominion, once proud and feared, was breaking apart without a single decisive defeat. Kale finally understood the horror of it. Humanity had not come to destroy the Velori. They had come to replace their way of ruling the galaxy. Where the Dominion demanded obedience, humans offered cooperation. Where princes ruled by fear, humans built loyalty through trust and competence. The war had reached its tipping point. Human fleets now moved openly through former Dominion territory, not as conquerors but as stabilizers. They repaired infrastructure, reopened trade routes, and protected civilian populations regardless of species. The galaxy was watching. Kale and Varin stood together on the bridge, silent as stars drifted past. Their empire was not lost yet, but it was no longer theirs to control. "They beat us without ever needing to crush us," Kale said bitterly. Varin nodded. "That is their greatest strength. They do not seek victory through destruction. They seek it through understanding." The Velori princes would soon face the truth of what they had lost and what humanity had become. The scouts had done their work, and the age of unquestioned Dominion rule was ending. The Velori throne system had not seen foreign fleets in generations. Its stars once shone as symbols of absolute power, guarded by layers of defenses and the pride of 1,000 conquered worlds. Now those stars looked cold and distant as human ships arrived at the edge of the system. They did not come in a massive armada. There was no overwhelming show of force, no dramatic threats. Instead, the human fleet moved with calm precision. Ships positioned themselves carefully, forming a loose perimeter that controlled every major approach without firing a single shot. Prince Kale stood on the bridge of the Dreadspire, staring at the display. His empire had shrunk to its core, and even that was now surrounded. "They could destroy us," he said quietly. "Why do they wait?" Kale hesitated, then nodded. "Open the channel. This conflict does not need to continue. We are not here to replace your rule. We are here to end harm." Instead, they were offered terms that allowed survival, but not dominance. The agreement was clear. The Velori Dominion would withdraw from all contested systems. Subject species would be granted independence. Trade would continue, but under mutual law. Human forces would guarantee the safety of borders but would not interfere in internal Velori governance. Kale felt something twist inside him. Pride, loss, and reluctant respect collided. "You turned our greatest strength against us," he said. "Our structure, our certainty." In the days that followed, the galaxy adjusted. Former Velori subject worlds declared independence peacefully. Human advisors assisted with rebuilding and defense, not as rulers but as partners. Trade routes reopened. Systems once locked in fear began to recover. The Velori people, long accustomed to expansion and conquest, faced a new reality. They were no longer feared, But they were no longer isolated either. Some resisted the change. Others welcomed the chance to exist without endless war. Kale and Varin returned to the throne world, their authority reduced but intact. They ruled now over a smaller realm, one that would have to adapt or fade. One evening, Kale stood alone in the observation chamber, watching human ships depart the system. They left as quietly as they had arrived. All of this, he said softly, began with a few scouts. Only for survival and stability. Human commanders debriefed calmly, noting what worked and what did not. Improvements were suggested. Lessons were saved. Humanity moved on. Across the stars, other empires took notice. They studied what had happened to the Velori Dominion. They saw a species that did not rush to dominate, did not rely on fear, and did not stop learning. Humanity's reputation spread, not as conquerors, but as a force that could not be bullied, outpaced, or easily understood. The lesson was clear. Humans did not win because they were the strongest. They won because they learned faster, adapted quicker, and worked together when it mattered most. On the Velori throne world, Kale finally allowed himself a bitter smile. "We thought scouts were weak," he said. "We thought losing meant failure." And somewhere in the vastness of space, human scouts continued their silent watch, ready to observe, adapt, and protect. Because humanity's greatest strength had never been its weapons. It had always been its mind.